But first, our top story this half an hour, whistleblower fallout. Acting National Intelligence Director Joseph Maguire will testify before Congress this morning on the complaint against President Trump and his call to the Ukrainian president. The president weighed in on that call yesterday at the UN.
It's the single greatest witch hunt in American history, probably in history, but in American history. It's a disgraceful thing. The letter was a great letter, meaning the letter revealing the call. That was done at the insistence of myself and other people that read it. It was a friendly letter. There was no pressure. If you notice, the stock market went up when they saw the nonsense. All of a sudden, the stock market went down very substantially yesterday when they saw a charge. After they read the charge, the stock market went up very substantially.
Joining us right now is the former Whitewater Independent Counsel and former federal prosecutor, Robert Ray. And, Robert, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
What's your reaction to all of this? Let's start there.
Well, the president's got it about right. It looks like the market absorbed the information, and they're more concerned about China and Iran and the things that we ought to be concerned about.
Does the president have any vulnerability here? What's your take on this impeachment inquiry?
We're on a financial program. I've listened to the Democrats now for months talk about the fact that they're approaching a majority of the majority to decide whether or not to proceed with impeachment. Last time I checked, a majority of the majority does not constitute a majority of the House. I don't actually think that the Speaker has the votes yet. That's what I think.
And I'm sure it dies in the Senate. So let's not forget the elephant in the room. This is wasting a lot of people's time because it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate, in my view.
Well, look, impeachment to me is two things based upon history. You have to show both a high crime and misdemeanor, and you have to show an abuse of power. We've lived through this before, most recently in the during the Clinton saga, the Clinton years. Here, you know, they've, from what I understand, they've tried, first they tried treason. Well, it's not treason because, you know, somebody helpfully pointed out Ukraine is an ally, not an enemy. The second thing, it's not bribery because the federal bribery statute doesn't apply to foreign government officials. Third, it's not extortion because there's no quid pro quo. And the argument that there's a quid pro quo contained in this 5-page transcript is a bit over the top and ridiculous unless you're going to claim that any time you're talking about foreign assistance on the one hand and asking for an investigation on the other, that necessarily means that the one was given for the other. And then finally, we know now, as the result of what was disclosed yesterday, that the matter was ultimately referred to the Justice Department for an investigation, a criminal referral. And the Public Integrity section came back and said it's not an illegal foreign campaign contribution because guess what? Asking for an investigation is not a thing of value to the benefit of Donald Trump personally. So if it's none of those things, that's 0 for 4, meaning that there's no crime has been committed.
Yeah.
And on abuse of power, while you can argue about whether or not, you know, this telephone call was an error in judgment, ultimately at the end of the day, what happened? The president released the foreign aid money, and there was no untoward investigation in the Ukraine against either Hunter Biden or the vice president. So as a result of all of this, I think, as you've pointed out, what does this do? It's aimed to potentially damage the president with this continuing, you know, diatribe about impeachment. At the same time, what does this do? It harms the vice president's campaign, and so it gives the Democrats apparently what they want, which is they're going to head in the direction now of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, get Biden out of the way.
And it's a trifecta because it then allows them also to basically, you know, have an excuse for the fact that the Democratic Congress is going to have accomplished nothing in the 2 years of its term leading up to the presidential election. So it only sort of, to answer your question, ultimately, it reinforces to me, since we will within a month or so now be in the election year, what an exceedingly bad idea it is for the country and not in the best interest of the country to be conducting an impeachment proceeding in an election cycle. That's for the voters to decide.
And you saw in the president's press conference yesterday, the Democrats were more high-handed with Ukraine than anything he did in that telephone conversation. You know, those 3 senators earlier in the year, in effect, implying to Ukraine, you don't do what we want to do, we're going to cut off your aid. That was overt. There was nothing subtle about that.
That's right, Stephen. And even with regard to the vice president, the vice president is the only one around who engaged in mafia-like tactics or strong-arm tactics against Ukraine. I mean, he was bragging, as the president pointed out in the phone call, about the fact that he leveraged Ukraine in order to get rid of a prosecutor prosecutor they didn't think was, doing his job to root out corruption.
We haven't heard a lot about Tony Podesta. He was lobbying for years for Ukraine. That should be coming out soon. It's a real spotlight now on Hunter Biden, the Bidens, and the Clintons.
Right. And look, I mean, ultimately, as we've tried to point out for months and months and months now, they seem to be very uninterested in getting to the bottom of that. Fortunately for us, the Attorney General is focused on that. That's where ultimately I think we're going to find out answers and people will be held to account. In the midst of all of this, we're wasting an enormous amount of time and burning an enormous amount of energy.
Right.
And, I think, at the end of the day, the voters are going to ultimately decide whether this was an overreach. Now, Nancy Pelosi owns impeachment. Where we go from here is anybody's guess.
Yeah, that's what Dagan said, actually, at the top of the show, yeah.
I want to know, though, in the short run where this goes, with the acting director of national intelligence, McGuire, as you pointed out, testifying publicly in front of the House Intelligence Committee later today. The whistleblower complaint, according to reporting, has been declassified, although not yet made public. But Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, who was, again, on the Senate side, has had the ability to look at it, said he found the report troubling. He said the administration ought not to be attacking the whistleblower, as some talking points suggest they plan to do. The Wall Street Journal reports the complaint might contain additional information and is based on a series of events. So we're going to hear from the public will likely get to see this. I hope everyone reads it, as they should have read the Mueller report. But again, how quickly does this get buttoned up, if you will, Robert?
I don't know. Obviously, I don't know because I haven't seen the whistleblower complaint. Although other members of Congress have suggested, after having looked at it last night, that it really doesn't do anything other than provide corroborating details to the fact that the conversation occurred. Well, hello, we now have the conversation between the two presidents. Is there really much more to it than that? I don't know.
See, I'm not surprised that the president would say, look, there's corruption. We want to know what happened in 2016. A lot of op-eds this morning in the Journal basically saying, look, it was bad judgment. The president did not have to bring up Joe Biden's son, did not have to bring up this stuff, probably should not have gone there at all. But there was no mention in that transcript of quid pro quo. There was no mention of aid.
Which apparently the LA Times concedes. So, look, I mean, I've looked at it, too.
Somebody called CNN and MSNBC because obviously they're not reading the actual
No,
facts.
and if you listen to Ocasio-Cortez, apparently we're supposed to impeach a president based upon the fact that there's been a deviation from democratic norms, whatever the heck that means.
Right. And Nancy Pelosi yesterday said, or 2 days ago said, it doesn't matter if there's no quid pro quo. Just the fact that he brought it up is a problem for us. That's impeachable, according to her.
Well, that's a nice thing to say. And while the Constitution itself doesn't provide explicit guidance, we do have a history here. We've been at this for 240 years. We've lived through Andrew Jackson, Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, and now this.
After what this president has been through, where the entire country was in hysteria over potential collusion with Russia and the media was driving the bus on it, I can understand the frustration there that he wants to get to the bottom of.
He was actually kind of wistful about that yesterday. I'm sure he'll recover from that today. But the long and short of it is he's right about the fact very few people would be able to actually continue to withstand this and to wake up every morning, as he says, and put his suit on and go back to work. And ultimately, the American people are going to judge this. And if what happens as a result of this, that the Democrats lose control of the House, they can look back to yesterday and Nancy Pelosi's action as the reason why it occurred.
Just really quickly, how long would this take in terms of the impeachment process?
Well, Jerry Nadler's apparently saying, we hope to get this done by the end of the year. I have to tell you again, my marker is if they haven't done anything by the date in November, which constitutes the one-year marker between there and the election in 2020, it's too late.
Too late.
So I can tell they're scrambling around trying to hustle here because they know an impeachment proceeding within an election year is not in the best interest of the country.
Isn't the timing very curious?
Yes, isn't it?
And if they don't get USMCA done by October 21st, which is the Canada elections, I don't think it gets done at all. And by the way, after all of this, I don't think it gets done.
Right, and
here we are. It doesn't get done.
And this is all assuming regularity. Yeah. What happens if there's some things that we can't foresee happen with regard to the United States on things that we should be worrying about? The country is going to have very little toleration for this if we've got a crisis.